JJ, you and I once again get to sit down and have what I love having these conversations with you because I learn so much and just get so much information from you. We're talking about ways to preserve your wealth, a subject that you and I have talked about a number of times. There's a mindset that has to get involved with that. There is also a lot of practical things that you have to do. What's the easiest for people?
Well, sometimes the hardest is that mindset because they've got to change learned behavior. Well, the good news is that doing it the right way is also learned behavior. And that's what you've got to really focus on. The easiest part is really what many people think is going to be the hardest part, which is setting up the legal entities and operating their entities on a daily basis. That's not really all that difficult, but it is different. And that's what I tell people all the time. Don't make it more complicated than it has to be. Just basically do what we tell you to do, follow some set rules, follow a formula. It's just like a recipe. If I want to bake a cake, I go get that recipe. I know we've talked about that numerous times, but I can't emphasize enough that that's what this is like. Following the steps in a recipe so that you can get the desired end results.
Well, there are some formulas that you can follow, but at the same time, everybody is a little bit different. There has to be an individualization of these plans or something to kind of tailor it to everybody's individual needs. So maybe speak to that point a little bit for me.
That's a great point. I was thinking the other day about, people ask me sometimes, what differentiates you from maybe these other companies out there or these other attorneys even, or just different providers of the services for setting up your business and structuring it in a way to pay less taxes, to protect yourself from lawsuits, to plan your estate. And here's one of the distinctions that I make quite often. There are times that people will come to me and they'll say, hey, I've got my entity set up. And I say, really? Who did you use to do that? Who did you work with on that? And they say, oh, I did it online over the internet. I found one of these companies that will incorporate you for as little as $45 and as little as 8 minutes. And I say, okay. And then there's an asterisk after that, isn't there? They say, yeah, there was, because it wasn't $45. It was much more than that. Why? Because it says plus state filing fees or any other applicable fees. Well, when you look at that, there are fees such as, oh, okay, we had to add this. We had to help you determine what type of entity that you needed. If they did that, most of the time they don't do that. You call them and say, okay, I need an S corporation, for instance. They say, okay, we'll set you up with an S corporation. You may not know that you needed an S corporation. You just heard somebody say, a really good entity is an S corporation. That's what I was set up with. Well, if you were set up with that, then I guess I need to be set up with that. That's not necessarily the case. You need to find something, as you mentioned, that's customized to your particular individual situation. So many times people will mess things up because they just got anything set up. And here's the challenge. I tell people all the time, you've got to take action. You've got to take action, got to take action, got to take action. They go out and take action, and then I say, you took the wrong action. It's discouraging, because they say, oh, great, just when I did what I thought I was supposed to do, I did it the wrong way. Well, the first step in any endeavor is to make sure that you take the time to plan things out, then execute that plan. So often people take this ready, fire, aim approach and say, wait a second, now you wonder why you hurt yourself, why you've gotten yourself into this predicament. You've got to make sure that you set forth that plan, see what it is that you need to do, then execute the plan. But you've got to formulate the plan from the very beginning.
Well, we're talking about wealth preservation. We're talking about preservation here. And, it's easy. And basically what you're talking about doing is saving as much money as you can, having as much money as you can. Philosophically, boil it down, though. What does it really come down to? What is really the ultimate goal of preservation?
Well, I use it. Sometimes I'll use symbols that can make sure that people understand things a lot better. And let's presume you've got a bucket. You've got a bucket and you want to fill this bucket with water. Well, people are so concerned about, okay, well, all I need is more water. Well, unfortunately, you got all these leaks in your bucket. You've got leaks for income taxes. You've got leaks for potential lawsuits. You've got leaks for any estate planning issues that you failed to address properly. You've got leaks for health care costs. You've got leaks for insurance. You've got leaks for all of these things. And then pretty soon you're holding your bucket saying, why don't I have any water in here? And the reason is because there are continually more and more leaks. So what people end up thinking about is, well, I've got to go out there and just find more ways to get more water. Well, if you don't take the time to patch up those holes, fix the leaks, address those leaks, it doesn't matter how much water you put in the top. That water is basically symbolic for income. People say, I just need to make more money. Well, I'm here to tell you there's no amount of money that you can make that you can't outspend. And the thing is, many times, it's not even something that you are just going out there and just blowing your money on. You may be blowing your money, but you didn't know you were blowing your money. There are ways to pay less money for your insurance premiums. We can show you how to do that. That's part of what these strategies address. Then there are other things that we can help you significantly reduce your taxes. Because yes, we've all got to pay taxes, but we don't have to pay the maximum in taxes. The IRS has set forth rules. We've got to know what those rules are. That's part of what we work with people on. The other thing is, say, healthcare cost. That's something that can fluctuate, in huge fluctuations that we're dealing with. Well, there are strategies that you can take advantage of to make sure you lower those costs. That's the focus that we've got to have with whatever it is that we're working on.
Somebody can make $200,000 a year. Somebody can make $2 million a year. The person making $200,000 a year can actually make more money. Is that what you're saying?
It's possible. You look at it, here's what happens a lot of times, is that people mistakenly believe that all they need is more money. Well, here's the first thing we've got to look at. Say that person making $2 million, depending upon how they're making the $2 million, they may have to take a pretty big chunk of that money in the form of taxes, income taxes. So you look at that, and let's say it could be up to 40%, maybe even more, depending upon what state they find themselves living in. So all of a sudden, let's say 40% of $2 million, you just lost $800,000. That's a lot of money. You say, well, yeah, but still they're left with $1.2 million. That's right, except for the fact that if that $2 million is in their business, then they had to provide health care expenses, plus they had any employees that they had to match their Social Security contributions and their Medicare contributions. So you start looking at these and you say, wait a second, that's a lot of money that's going out in the form of taxes, that if we could change some of the ways of how we structure this, that's the key, is that it's a matter of what you're able to keep. It's not what you make, it's what you keep.
All right, you've got some strategies that I want folks to take a look at. We're going to come back and talk about them a little bit more in depth.
Strategy 1. Identify the threats to your wealth.
When it comes to protecting things that are near and dear to us, such as our homes, we're most often reactive instead of proactive. Now, what do I mean by that? Think about this. When do people typically put in an alarm system? They put it in after their home has been broken into. When do they buy fire extinguishers? That's right, after they or maybe someone close to them has experienced a fire. People are reactive because they hear about threats to their assets, but may not really comprehend the origin of those dangers. More importantly, they may not realize just how likely they are to be under attack by these threats. Make no mistake about it, your assets are at risk. The perils are very real and are much more common than you may believe. In fact, many of you may be experiencing them right now, but may not realize that there are things that can be done to reduce or even eliminate the impact of these threats. In order to protect against these threats, you must identify them. In today's world, the biggest dangers to your wealth are lawsuits, income taxes, death taxes, improperly incurred debt, and catastrophic healthcare expenses. The good news is that there are some outstanding proactive strategies that can be put in place to protect against these threats. The first thing that you must do is to know your enemy by identifying the things that are hazardous to your wealth.
Strategy 2. Develop a battlefield mindset.
In order to protect your assets from the threats of lawsuits, income taxes, death taxes, improperly incurred debt, and healthcare costs, you must be proactive. Your plan must be in place before you need it rather than after. You see, once you need it, it's already too late. Once you have a catastrophic illness, health insurance is no longer an affordable option. Once a lawsuit has been filed, it's basically too late to set up protection. I think of this proactive strategy as developing a battlefield mindset. Simply put, you must set proper defenses in place to protect yourself from attack by these threats to your wealth. More specifically, you must do it before you are attacked. A good battlefield commander will make certain that his troops are well placed and fortified against the enemy before there is any engagement. The commander will also have strategies in place and train his troops in drills so that they are ready when the conflict takes place. Notice I said when, I didn't say if. This is the mindset that you must develop if you intend to keep your assets safe. You must fortify your assets before they are attacked, and you must have an ongoing plan in place to make sure that your fortifications are at full strength against the enemy. The enemy is indeed out there. To protect yourself, you must develop a battlefield mindset.
Strategy 3. Establish a personalized financial fortress system.
When I speak about protecting assets, I often use the example of building a fortress around them to keep them safe. This fortress concept is a good example because not every castle has the same structure or defenses. Each one is built with defenses that suit the particular needs of the lord or lady of that castle and the potential enemies surrounding them. You may not be living in this type of Dungeons and Dragons scenario. However, your personalized financial fortress system should be built in this same manner to suit your personal financial needs as well as your goals. By looking at where you are as well as where you're going, you can set into place the cornerstones of your financial fortress. Like a real castle, yours may start out relatively small with the financial equivalent of only a wall and perhaps a gate as protection. But as the needs for your fortress grow, you will add on additional components to your protection plan. This is similar to adding maybe rooms and soldiers to protect what's inside. Regardless of the size of your fortress, if you don't build it, if you don't establish it, you will never have the proper protection that the fortress can give you. You absolutely must put your personalized fortress into place before you need it, rather than waiting until it's too late.
All right, JJ, talking about identifying these threats to your wealth, you said first of all that you have to know your enemy. You have to identify what is going to be a hazard to your wealth. What are some things that can be a hazard?
Well, really, they all kind of boil down into a few key areas. You know, I talk to people all the time about lawsuits, income taxes, death taxes, and I've added a few because when I work with people primarily at my asset protection and our tax seminars, we focus on those three, the lawsuits, income taxes, and death taxes. What I've kind of added when we're talking about the world of personal finances as a whole, I say you've also got to think about debt. Debt can be every bit as devastating, if not more so, than taxes and lawsuits. And you really have to address that from the very beginning. Also, we've got healthcare costs. That's something that is increasing more and more every single year in this country. We've got to make sure that we address those because the more we find ourselves dealing with these, those are the things that can destroy us. And the hardest part of it is that they're sneaky. They kind of sneak up on you, and you may not find that you're in this amount until it's too late. All of a sudden you say, wow, I had budgeted a certain amount, but I forgot about taxes. I forgot about my health care cost. I forgot about having to service this debt. Those are things that can absolutely destroy you if you don't properly take care of addressing these things.
Do you kind of help make sure that all of those bases are covered in advance? I'm not saying a money back guarantee or anything, but I mean, there's always the unexpected and things that you cannot plan for. Can you truly budget, think through? Have you seen it all? I mean, can you really account for everything that could possibly come up?
Well, that's what we do. I mean, there are things when you say you don't know what's going to come up. Okay, well, that's why we may have an emergency fund set to the side. See, we have strategies that help people regardless of what they're doing. They set these strategies up. They make sure they've got initially, they take care of things. We can identify the potential for maybe some lawsuits. I don't know where the lawsuit's going to come from. However, I do know that we may have lawsuits that might pop up. So I've got to have myself covered. I've got to have insurance, but insurance in and of itself isn't going to take care of everything. Also, I have to have legal entities that I take care of. Then from an income tax standpoint, we know that we're going to face income taxes. Okay, well, let's kind of forecast what we think based upon our projected income, because you can do that as well. So based upon that projected income, we can forecast maybe our tax liability. We can prepare for that. And then when you're making your estimated quarterly tax payments, if you're a business or if you're a W-2 salaried employee, it's taken out through your withholding. So you start looking at some of these things. You've got to plan for these. Healthcare, we've got to have the proper types of insurance. That's what many people aren't fully cognizant of when it comes to healthcare. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail, but you've got to have maybe a health savings account. A lot of times people are finding that it's difficult to actually get proper insurance, proper healthcare. They don't even know what type to get, and then they find themselves faced with a situation with a healthcare crisis that they're not able to adequately address. We've got to make sure they can do that. So basically, to answer your question, long story short, is that yes, we can basically anticipate all sorts of things. I don't know exactly where it's going to come from. I don't know exactly what you're going to be faced with. However, I can budget to make sure we're taken care of. And the thing is, you may have some money that you had budgeted here, well then it rolls over to next year. So now you've built up more of this, and if you didn't need that, now that can go into your long-term investment plan as well.
You also talked about in one of your strategies having a battlefield mindset. I mean, really kind of getting prepared to go to battle, go to war, because it's a matter of when, not if. Elaborate on that a little bit more.
Well, when we say the battlefield mindset, a lot of my work with people when I'm helping them protect themselves from lawsuits, I say, let's think about it. If you lived in a neighborhood where every day you see the police driving up and down making arrests, you hear about how much crime there is, burglaries, also maybe violent crime, you hear about all these things. If you lived in that neighborhood, you would do what it takes. You say, maybe I'm going to put bars on my windows, I'm going to put an extra security door, I'm going to have a better security system, I may get a dog that can take care of me, I may do whatever it takes because you recognize the threats. The challenge that we have in this country is that most people are just really somewhat ignorant of the risk that we're faced with. And I don't use that term ignorant in a despairing manner. What I mean is that we just don't know about these risks.
Maybe a little gullible.
That's right.
That something like that could happen.
Yeah, and naive, really, because we say, well, no, that only happens to those people that have the multi-million-dollar estates. Well, you know what? It can happen to everyone, and you've got to realize that and make sure that you prevent. Now, when you say, I'm going to do it after the fact, that's when it's too late. You've got to adopt that mindset from the very beginning.
All right. You also you mentioned about establishing this this fortress system, and I guess this goes back to the mentality again here. Give me some examples of ways that people protect themselves, and the ways that you can build this fortress system that you're talking about.
Well, first of all, let's take a look at the fortress system. When we're focusing on a fortress, I mean, think about a medieval fortress. When you look at that, you say essentially you've got the huge stone walls. So you think about that's the first line of defense. Because you say, okay, well, can't really climb over that wall. Maybe I could. What if I leaned up just a ladder against that wall? Well, you can't do that because now it's surrounded by a moat. Okay, well, what if we swam across and then we started climbing the wall? Well, in the moat, there may be alligators or other things, piranhas maybe, something that's going to protect against somebody just trying to swim across. Okay, well, then on top of that, the overall walls, maybe you've got people that are going to pour down boiling water on you if you try to go up, or they're going to shoot you with arrows. Well, think about that from the overall concept of what will they have are multiple layers of protection. We can do the exact same thing by properly structuring ourselves. Now, we can use legal entities. We can combine legal entities with other legal entities. So we've got multiple layers of protection just from entities. But on top of those layers, maybe we could add some insurance. But it's got to be the proper type of insurance. That's another thing that we work with people on, is identifying the insurance that they need. Sometimes people will say, if I have insurance, I don't need entities. Or they'll say, if I have entities, I don't need insurance. Which ones do I need? I say, yes. Because you need both.
Yeah.
And that's why people oftentimes, they're looking for the cheapest possible solution that they can find, and sometimes that can be their most costly overall plan, is to save money on this. This is not something you want to be saving, cutting corners on. Now, we can cut corners on maybe cutting down on some of the premiums that we have to pay because we found better insurance for a better price. That's what we help people with. Doesn't mean that you're cutting on all your expenses. When we talk about budgeting and debt and things like that, it doesn't mean, I'm never telling anyone they need to live a pauper lifestyle or a pauper mentality. What I'm saying is that you need to properly allocate your expenditures.
You kind of don't know that if it works or not, because if somebody comes after you, and they get this defeatist attitude because they see so many layers of protection, then they're not going to come sue you or come after your assets. So how do you know when you win? How do you measure that?
Well, you bring up a very good point. And years ago, I was purchasing, it was the first Mercedes I ever purchased. And when I was there, I said, wait a second, what makes this so much better, according to the salesperson, or what makes it more expensive than maybe some other cars? And he looked at me and he said, well, I'll tell you what, a lot of the money that you're spending is on things that we hope you never use. And I kind of looked at him, I said, now what do you mean by that? You hope I never use these? That doesn't sound like a very good point. And he said, that's what the mentality typically is. He said, what I want you to recognize is that our protectionary systems and our protectionary measures that are involved here, we hope you never have to use these. We hope you never get in a car accident. But if you do, we know that the extra steps that we've taken to make this car so safe are going to benefit you immensely. That's what they meant by we hope you never use it. When I work with someone on their overall asset protection plan, I truly hope they never have to use it, because I hope that they're not faced with this type of situation. However, if they are, I want to make sure that I know that they're protected. It's that same mindset. It's kind of with healthcare. I was talking to somebody one time about this particular drink that he was drinking as far as a nutritional supplement, and he was talking about how it helps you to keep from getting cancer. I said, well, how do you know it works? You don't get cancer? Well, it's the same type of mindset. Well, to me, it's almost worth it because it's very simple. Something I learned from my mother years and years ago. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
All right, there's some other strategies that we're going to go through. Let's take a look at some of those from your other session, and we'll come back and we'll talk about them.
Strategy 4. Create an estate plan, regardless of your net worth.
When most people think of estate planning, they think of the super wealthy. Names like Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Rockefeller typically come to mind. What you must realize, however, is that estate planning is not just for the super wealthy. You don't have to own multi-million-dollar houses and private jets or have millions in a trust fund for your children to need an estate plan. Basically, everyone needs an estate plan of some sort. Depending upon your situation, your estate plan may be as simple as a few documents and directives. It doesn't necessarily have to be reams of paper and dozens of lawyers. Essentially, whatever you own is considered part of your estate. How that is handled upon your death depends on what type of plan that you have in place. There are many reasons to have an estate plan in place. One is to provide for yourself and your loved ones in the event that you may become incapacitated. Your estate plan can direct your medical care and wishes when you're not able to do so. If you have minor or special needs children or maybe dependent parents, an estate plan can be drafted which will provide them with the care that you would want them to have, not the care that the courts decide for them. An estate plan is about carrying out your wishes for how to handle your estate upon your death. This can only be done if you've taken the time to create that estate plan.
Strategy 5. Operate your activity as a business, not a hobby.
I often hear people telling others that they need to get a hobby. Well, the attorney in me immediately wants to inform them that no, they don't need a hobby, they need a business. Fortunately, the practical side of me knows when to simply say nothing at all. The truth remains that you need to start a home-based business to take advantage of the many benefits that a home-based business can bring you. I often get the question, so what kind of business should I start? Well, there's no easy answer for this question. I certainly wouldn't want to make a suggestion without knowing someone fairly well. I mean, I could spend all day suggesting home-based businesses and have the other person saying, well, no, that doesn't really interest me. It doesn't give me something that I could do or would even want to do. Well, one of the easiest ways to start a home-based business that you will enjoy and often already have a head start on is to look to your current hobbies or your current interests. For many of you, you may already have some sort of a hobby that you're well into, such as woodworking, photography, web design, handcrafted fishing lures, even things like renovating houses or buildings. That may be your passion, may be your current hobby. Well, odds are that if you're into your current hobby, you already have established a space for conducting it, such as a craft or workspace, or maybe even a home office. You may even have clients who already pay you a little, or maybe even a lot, for the fruits of your hobby. Now it's time to take things to another level and operate your activity as a business, not as a hobby.
Strategy 6. Form a legal entity for operating your business.
Operating a home-based business is essential to take advantage of the tremendous benefits that businesses are entitled to under the IRS. Establishing and operating your business are just the start to being able to reap huge rewards that major companies enjoy. The great news is that your small business can reap these same rewards. The difference between your home-based business and the big boys is that their legal team structured them to operate their business within a legal entity. Legal entities take the advantages of operating as a business and ramp them up to the next level by giving you additional tax benefits, much-needed asset protection, and even some built-in estate planning benefits as well. Legal entities come in many forms, but for businesses there are generally three types: corporations, limited liability companies, and limited partnerships. Which type you want to form for your business depends on several factors that are unique to your situation and your specific type of business. Since there are many factors involved, selecting the type of legal entity which best suits you should only be done with the guidance of an entity specialist. An entity specialist can inform you of the advantages as well as the potential drawbacks to each type of legal entity. This powerful knowledge can help you make an educated decision about which type of entity is best suited to your particular individual needs. This is an investment that will produce huge returns for years to come.
All right, JJ, creating an estate plan regardless of your net worth. So you're telling me that anybody of any income level really ought to have an estate plan. Why is that?
Absolutely, because everyone has an estate. Now see, sometimes that seems contrary to what people believe, because they say, I don't really have much of an estate. All I have is blank. You know what? You just demonstrated you have an estate when you said, all I have is blank. Because see, if you've got a house, if you have any assets whatsoever, you may be negative as far as your overall financial statement. However, you've got children. You've got to make sure how they're going to be taken care of. You've got to make sure that your family's taken care of, your loved ones, your beneficiaries are taken care of upon your death. That's why everyone needs an estate plan, because it's not only for those people who have a lot of stuff. That's one of the biggest misconceptions and misnomers out there. That's what I work to make sure that I'm able to overcome these misconceptions and help people learn that indeed they do need an estate plan and they need to set it up sooner rather than later.
Now, also one of the things that you can do to make your estate flourish a little bit more is that you've said that people could get into something that is a business, not a hobby. I love that concept. Tell me a little bit about how people need to turn their minds and their way of thinking into those hobbies becoming a way to make money.
You know, it's kind of funny. Sometimes people will accuse me of being too much of a capitalist, or I'm constantly thinking about business and the ways to increase business all the time. And I say, thank you. They may be trying to criticize me, and I take it as a compliment. It's one of these things that I look at, I say, if I'm going to put that much effort into something, I want to make sure that I get as much benefit from it as possible. And I've had people say, no, you don't understand. I get the benefit just by being able to do it. The less stress that's involved, and then all of these ancillary benefits that I'm going to be able to take advantage of. And I say, wait a second. You mean to tell me that if I could show you a way that you could make more money at that, you could pay less taxes by doing the same thing? You don't have to change anything. I'll handle the changes for you because we'll just structure it a little differently. You still do what you've been doing, do it the same way, you still get your stress relief, you still get the fun that you derive from this activity, but structure it in a way where it's a business. You wouldn't do that? And they say, well, yeah, I think maybe I'd do that. And I say, okay, that's all I'm talking about. I'm not saying all of a sudden now we need to turn this into some enterprise that's going to add a lot of stress to your life. I'm saying do the same thing. You've got to have a profit motive for it to be a business. You can't just say, yeah, I do this and I lost a lot of money every year, because there are hobby loss rules under the tax code where you've got to show a profit 3 of the last 5 years. Well, that applies to almost all types of business structure except corporations. When you look at that, you say, maybe I could set up a corporation. Not saying that's exactly what you need. I'd have to look at your independent circumstances. What I am saying is that you could change this from a hobby to a business and turn it into much more of a money-making opportunity for you, a money-making endeavor that can also help you with your taxes.
Do you ever have anyone that starts down that road? They have a hobby, they turn it into a business, it becomes so much of a business that it's not a fun hobby anymore?
I have had that. You know, you look at that and sometimes, you know, there's a saying that says, do what you love and the money will follow. And I talk to people about that all the time. And I say, you know, that's what you need to do. Find something that doesn't feel like work to you, and then you'll have it made for the rest of your life, because you'll be passionate about showing up to work. Because it doesn't feel like work. It's something, I'd do this if I didn't even make any money, just because I love doing it. People that find that are the luckiest people in the world. I say lucky, but basically luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the key right here, is that they've found something that they're passionate about. If it gets to the point where all of a sudden you say, now this is turning too much into work and it's not worth it, maybe you need to find something else. However, what I've found are the people that are the happiest are the people that are working at something that they truly enjoy.
Now, you also mentioned earlier, you were talking about S corporations. You've got that, you've got LLCs, you've got limited partnerships, and other types of business entities. Depending on the day of the week, they all get hyped a little bit differently. There's benefits and liabilities for each of them. So how do you make the decision, this is the right one for me?
Well, really, when you say, how do I make this decision, my clients make the decision for me. Now that may sound strange that I say my clients make the decision for me. What I mean by that specifically is that their situation and their factual pattern that they provide me with, as far as they provide me with documentation. Here's how I'm currently set up. Here's the business that I'm in. Here's where I want to take this. Here's what I want to accomplish. Now they've given me the correct information to make those decisions. Because I've got to take a look at their family situation. Are they married or are they single? Do they have kids? Do they not have kids? That, along with what type of activity they're involved with, how much money we're dealing with, what types of expenditures they're incurring, those are the factors that I take a look at in determining, does this person need a limited liability company? Would they be better off with a limited partnership? And some of it is not even their current situation, but their future situation. There are certain types of legal entities that may limit you if you're planning on building a business to sell. I've had some clients that basically their entire business is to grow businesses, then sell them to somebody else. Then they go back and they start a new business. They sell it to somebody else. They're extraordinarily good at what they do. However, we've got to structure them a little differently than somebody that says, no, this is a long-term overall business plan that I hope to pass on to my children down the road.
Those are some great tips and some strategies there. But let's look at some other things that you're talking about in terms of preserving wealth. Let's come back and discuss those.
Strategy 7. Change the type of dollars that you spend.
I always tell my students that to get the benefits of a home-based business, you must continually act and think like a business, not like an individual. Part of this concept is that you must learn to spend your money more like a business rather than like an individual. You must learn to change the type of dollars that you spend. Now, don't run out and exchange your US dollars for euros or yen or anything like that, because that isn't what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the fact that businesses, by law, can spend their dollars differently than we can as individuals. They can spend their money before taxes and take a significant chunk out of their income. This means that they can deduct a lot of their expenses against taxes. When you operate your home-based business and spend before tax dollars, you can save yourself significant amount of money in taxes each and every year. How much you can save depends on many factors, not the least of which is how much you are currently thinking and acting like a business. It's a fact that businesses, if operated properly, pay significantly less in taxes than we do as individuals. To reap the rewards, you have to do something to make it happen. You must learn to think and act like a business. You must learn to change the type of dollars you spend from after-tax dollars to before-tax dollars.
Strategy 8. Change the nature of your income.
A complaint that I hear over and over in my practice and my teaching is that people are paying too much in taxes. So my response to this statement is always the same: what are you doing about it? It seems like just about everyone wants to legally reduce their tax burden, but they simply have no idea as to where to start, or they're completely overwhelmed by the entire idea. Little steps can take you a long way to reducing your taxes. Enough of these little steps can add up to a pretty significant chunk of tax savings. One relatively simple step is to change the nature of your income from earned income to unearned income. If you can change earned income, such as your salary or W-2 income, to unearned income from things such as rents or royalties, you can save big bucks. For example, by simply changing the type of income you receive, you can cut over 12% in taxes on that income. If you think about that, 12% of, say, $50,000 would add up to $6,000 of extra money in your pocket. If you could get a 12% return on an investment, say maybe a mutual fund or a stock investment, most people would be extraordinarily happy. But it gets even better, because that 12% savings is not just for this year, but for each and every year that you continue to employ this very valuable strategy. One simple change in the type of income that you receive can bring about powerful tax savings and put more money in your pocket. This is why it's so important to change the nature of your income.
Strategy 9. Use only tax strategies, never tax evasion.
You know, a pretty universal sentiment out there is that everyone wants to legally pay the least amount in taxes possible. There's one word in that statement that I want to especially emphasize, and that is legally. Defrauding the government by cheating at the tax game is called tax evasion. Tax evasion is a high-risk move, and one that has brought down many wealthy and very powerful people. We all make jokes about the IRS, but in truth, the IRS can be quite savvy. They know just about every legal as well as illegal way one could use to reduce taxes illegally. Think about this. These are the people who brought down Al Capone when no one else could. More recently, one of the charges that brought down John Gotti, known as the Teflon Don, was tax evasion. The folks with the IRS know what they're doing, and they've been doing it very successfully for years. Basically, the lesson I teach people is this: don't fall into the trap of trying to outsmart them. There's no need for this foolishness. With all the legal ways to dramatically slash your taxes, evading or illegally denying the government its due isn't just dangerous, it's downright dumb. Doing things properly and legally avoiding taxes can save you enough to create the wealth and lifestyle that you've always wanted. Illegally evading your taxes can buy you a government-sponsored, all-expenses-paid mandatory vacation and a new wardrobe of orange jumpsuits. Make wise tax decisions, and you can be sure to keep not only your wealth, but also your freedom.
All right, JJ, one of the things that you're talking about in that last segment right there is you're talking about changing your mindset to these after-tax dollars to pre-tax dollars. How difficult is it for people to change that mindset?
Well, it's kind of funny because a lot of times I'll say, change the types of dollars you spend. And they say, change the types of dollars I spend. So I don't use US dollars, now I'm using Canadian dollars, or I'm using maybe Japanese yen or the euro. And I say, well, depending upon the value of the dollar, you may want to. But what I mean by that is change the way that you spend your money. Stop spending after-tax dollars, start spending before-tax dollars. I'm going to say that again. Stop spending after-tax dollars, start spending before-tax dollars. Let me kind of clarify that for just a moment. You see, after-tax dollars means you've made the money and now you paid taxes on it, then you get to spend it. Well, see, that means it's not a deductible expenditure. Well, if you would spend before-tax dollars, it means you make the money, you spend it on a deductible expense and a deductible item, then you're taxed on it. So your overall taxable income is lowered. That's what I work with people on all the time. That's why I say change the types of dollars you spend. Spend your money on deductible items rather than non-deductible items. And we can also teach you how to turn non-deductible items into deductible items by depending on what type of business that you have. That's what we structure.
Give me an example of that, how you would change a non-deductible item into a deductible item.
Well, really, somewhat as we discussed before the break when we took a look at those strategies, changing a hobby into a business. I think we should ban all hobbies and they should all become businesses. See, and I've gotten beaten up where people say, that capitalist pig. I tell you what. Well, thank you. That's a compliment. But you look at it and you say, stop using your time. If you're working this hard for something, change it from a hobby into a business. That's a primary example of treat it like a business. Sometimes people will have something that they've really developed a proficiency in. You know, I've seen people that will build models. They build these models and they just give them away, or maybe they even sell them, but they're not doing it as a business. I say, you need to create a business for this. Sell it on eBay. Do some of these things. You've painted some gorgeous paintings. You've built some models, maybe model ships or things along those lines. Whatever it is, you've got to start thinking like a business rather than an individual.
One of the things that you said in your strategies too is that you talked about that you can change the type of income and that can alter your taxes, and the tax laws change all of the time. It's very, very difficult to kind of keep a grip on all of that stuff. So, I mean, how do you do that? I mean, how does a person in business who's worried about making money, controlling expenses, doing the right thing, and how often do the tax laws change that can impact that regular routine of doing business?
See, this is a perfect example of how everything that I do blends together. You know, when we talk about the overall wealth escape plan, sometimes people say, I don't need to envision. I don't need to strategize. I only need to create, or I don't really need to accumulate even. Maybe I need to preserve. No, you need to do all of these things. Primarily, you need to execute. Make sure that you put your plan into action. What we're talking about right here specifically is that you've got to make sure that you can surround yourself with a mastermind team. This is probably the best news that some people could ever hear, is that you don't have to become an expert in everything. The people that I've seen that you asked earlier about what if it becomes more like work? Those are the people where it becomes more like work because they try to do everything themselves. And if you're setting yourself up to become an expert in everything, first of all, you don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
So you've got to make sure that you're able to surround yourself with people who have core areas of their competency and go out there and seek the best. Work with people. That's why people come to me as an attorney and as a professional that they can work with their finances. It's the same way with whatever it is. Find a good tax professional out there that you can work with. Turn things over to them so you can focus on your highest and best use.
I know that this happens frequently. You disagree with the advice your tax professional is giving you. So, maybe speak to a little bit of how you find the right tax attorney or CPA or whoever that you trust the advice that they're given, but at the same time, they're not infuriating you because they're telling you no on certain things.
Well, and here's the thing. You've got to develop a certain base level of knowledge. And I tell people that don't completely turn it over, because if you go in there in utter and complete ignorance and say, here's my circumstances, do whatever you think is the best overall solution. They may look at it and say, we're not going to let you deduct these things. And you say, I can deduct these things. Let me show you how I can deduct them. Well, if you end up having to show your tax professional how to do their job over and over and over again, my question is, why are you paying them? You shouldn't be paying them if you're having to do all of the work. Well, at the same time, you shouldn't have to do all the work. One way to find a good tax professional is to maybe interview that tax professional. Go in for the initial consultation, the initial conversation, if you will, and just basically see who might kind of blend in with your personality. Another thing might be find somebody that you know who is similar to you, ask them who they use, and ask them how they feel about that person. Do they like them? Would they prefer to find somebody else? Ask around, because making that decision is going to be an important decision, but also realize that you're not locked into it once you make that decision for this year. If you didn't really have the best results, find somebody else next year.
You're talking about tax strategies and not tax evasion as well. And I know this is a big sticking point with you, is that you don't encourage people to cheat on their taxes. You're a by the books, by the rules kind of guy, yet some people still think that they can bend those rules when they need to.
Well, this ties right into the last question. When I say how to go about finding a tax professional, sometimes people will say, okay, well, I heard you say that I need to interview them. I'm going to interview you. And then I say, I welcome it. Bring it on, if you will. So I say, come on, let's talk about things. And they come in, and I've had times where people say, here's what I want to do, and here's how I want to do it, and we're going to look the other way on this, we'll look the other way, and I say, I'm probably not the best fit for you. And they say, well, what do you mean? I heard you're the best. I heard you're the one I should talk to. And I said, well, I don't know who you heard that from, but if they told you that I was going to do this, my guess is they don't know me very well. Because I'm not going to do anything to risk my livelihood, to risk the wealth that I've built up. I'm not going to do that, because you look at it and you say, why on earth would I jeopardize all of that for one person's situation? I'm not going to do that. Anybody that would ask me to do that, they've got the wrong mindset. The way it is, I surround myself with people that bring positive energy, positive comments, and essentially it's one of those things, what goes around comes around. I believe in that. I believe that what we throw out there in the universe comes back upon us. Sometimes people may think that's a little mystical, but I believe that it is. You get what you give. And I want to make sure that I'm giving as much as I can at all times, and at the same time doing it in all fairness, even fairness to the IRS.
All right, you're giving us some good advice. We want to look at some more strategies that you have put together and laid out there for us. We're going to come back with some more Q&A.
Strategy 10. Recognize the different types of debt.
You can't turn on the television or radio these days without hearing ads selling some sort of get-out-of-debt program. Programs promise that you can be completely debt-free in a relatively short time and that you can know true financial freedom as well as have peace of mind. Ironically enough, the very next commercial will be for some sort of low-cost or no-cost loan that has the benefit of helping you maximize your money, cut your taxes, and improve your overall credit rating. With this kind of confusion, it's hard to know what to do. The first step in sifting the good information from the bad is to learn which types of debt are good and which types are bad. That's right, there is such a thing as good debt as opposed to bad debt. The key to identifying a good debt is to learn the effective use of debt and benefits that may come from that good debt. Bad debts typically give you none of those benefits and basically let you accumulate stuff right now while increasing the cost of that item substantially for the privilege of owning it now. By knowing the different types of debt, you can determine whether or not your debt needs to be reduced, increased, and how you need to change bad debts into good debts. By reducing your bad debt and increasing your good debt, you can do more to put your money to work for you instead of you working for your money.
Strategy 11. Protect your wealth by protecting your health.
The most important gift that any of us can have is the gift of good health. In this day and age, we're living long, healthy lives, and we're fighting and winning the battle against many diseases and illnesses that were once fatal. Today in this country, we have the opportunity to do more to protect our health than our ancestors could ever imagine. But this world-class healthcare certainly isn't free. Someone has to pay for it. Whether that be through higher taxes or higher insurance premiums, there's a cost involved, and that cost can be sky high. Even with insurance or assistance, one catastrophic illness or accident can wipe out your hard-earned wealth. Like your taxes, my question to you regarding your health is, what are you doing to protect your health? Whether you realize it or not, when you protect your health, you protect your wealth. Let me say that again. When you protect your health, you protect your wealth. It's been said that good health is like money and that people only talk about it to the extent that they don't have it. Taking the initial steps to put a health preservation plan into place can prevent nasty surprises in your future in the event of a healthcare crisis. Taking care of your health is one of the most important aspects to your overall wealth preservation plan. Like anything else in the wealth escape, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Strategy 12. Continually assess your personal preservation plan.
It's been said that the only constant in the universe is change. A wise man may have made this statement, but it doesn't take a genius to know that this is an absolute truth. Sometimes people may feel as if some things never change, but in truth, life is just the opposite. One thing that we know is that our lives are in a constant state of change. We age each year, our families change each year with births, marriages, deaths, and maybe even divorce. We change jobs, cars, houses. Many people may even change spouses or significant others. As people stop to reassess whether or not their life changes cause them to need a different vehicle, house, or job, they often ignore other crucial parts of their life. They never considered that as their life changes, their personal preservation plan may need changes in order to keep up with the speed of life. Waiting until it's too late to make any adjustments to your plan can have catastrophic results. An out-of-date plan may be nearly as bad as no plan at all. Once your plan is in place, you must assess your plan on a regular basis to make sure that it's still a perfect fit. Just like a suit that has been tailored for your dimensions may not fit anymore, your wealth preservation plan can lose its fit over time as well. For this reason, you must continually assess your personal preservation plan.
All right, JJ, one of the things that you're mentioning there is you've got this good debt and you got this bad debt. I know you said that there is such a thing as good debt. It doesn't feel like that to me. So tell me a little bit more, elaborate a little bit more, good debt versus bad debt.
Okay, well, when you talk about good debt versus bad debt, first of all, we've got to look at why was this debt incurred? If I'm incurring debt, really there are two different types of assets. We've got income-producing assets and non-income-producing assets. Well, if I incur debt so that I can go out and obtain some income-producing assets, that may be worth it. Let's say that I'm having to pay, let's say I borrow money to purchase real estate. If I borrow money to purchase real estate, let's say I have to pay 7-8% interest on the borrowed money, but then the real estate is going up in value at maybe 10% per year. Well, that makes sense. I would do that. At the same time, maybe it's hard to find something that's going up 10%. What if it stays the same? Okay, what if I went out there, I incurred the debt, but then I rented that real estate to somebody? They're making the payments for me. Now I've leveraged myself, somebody else is paying back the debt on my behalf. Well, that sounds like a pretty good situation as well. That's an example of some good debt. Another situation that I talk to people about in my asset protection seminars is they'll ask me, how could I get some ultimate asset protection? Well, I've got different strategies that I can teach them with that, and I say, let me tell you about one of the greatest tools of asset protection available, debt. They say, what do you mean debt? I mean, that's part of why I'm here is I want to get myself out of debt. And I say, well, I'm going to help you do that. However, carrying certain types of debt can actually be advantageous from an asset protection standpoint. The reason for that is that when you look at it and you say, the difference upon the value of the property versus what you owe. And when I say property, I don't just mean real estate, whether it's a vehicle or whatever it might be. The difference is your equity. Well, the equity is what somebody could come after you and take. Let's say that I've got a $500,000 house, for instance, and I owe $450,000 on that house. Well, sometimes people would look at it and say, okay, well, you've got $500,000 at risk. Not really. The difference, the $500,000 value versus the $450,000 that I owe on it, there's $50,000 in equity. That's what's at risk. Well, what could I do? Maybe I took out a home equity line of credit against that. That's more debt, more potential debt. Now it's encumbered property. As an attorney going after that, if the property's encumbered, you got to take a look at it and realize that you're going to be second, if not third in line as far as being compensated if you win that case. I don't want to go after somebody if I'm that type of attorney. Going after this type of individual, I don't want to proceed with that lawsuit. So that's an example of good debt as well. So there's really two different aspects. One other, I've got to make sure I squeeze this in, is that sometimes people have a lot of debt, and when they service that debt, maybe on credit cards, that interest is not deductible. Now, if they put it with a home equity loan, the payments for that interest, that is deductible. You see, so there's
Right.
also different types of debt that can be deductible versus non-deductible. That's something else we've got to look at. These all factor in determining good debt versus bad debt.
And tick off for me a few examples. I mean, I'm sure everybody's got their own of what bad debt is.
Bad debt would be going out and saying, you know what, the NCAA college basketball tournament, maybe it's that time of the year and it's coming up, I need a big screen. Well, I don't have enough money to afford that big screen, but you know what, I'm going to put it on my credit card. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now pretty soon you've got an asset that's depreciating in value, and you go out there and you've now paid not only, let's say it's $2,000, but then you borrow on it at a credit card that may be as much as close to 20%. Well, now you're paying not only that, but and sometimes people would say, this is another misnomer. They say, okay, 20% of the $2,000, now I guess I'm paying a total of $2,400 for that. That's not the case. If you get stuck in that minimum payment cycle, you could pay thousands of dollars for that particular television. Classic example of bad debt is going out and borrowing money to buy a car. Why? Because what we just talked about is you've got a depreciating asset that's non-income producing, it's going down in value, at the same time it's not producing any income. Pretty soon people find themselves what they call upside down in vehicles all the time, where they owe more than the vehicle's worth. If they say, I can't afford this, they're trapped. What are they going to do? They're going to go sell the vehicle? Okay, if you sell it for less than what you owe on it, you've got to make up the difference. If you don't have the money to make up the difference, now you've really dug a hole for yourself. It's very difficult to get out of.
Protect your wealth by protecting your health. Another strategy, another tip that you've advocated. You're talking about basically healthcare costs and the fact that they can, be financially devastating to a lot of people, and we've seen that time and time again. Are we just talking about dollars when you're talking about protecting your health? What are you talking about?
Not at all. See, a lot of times people say, what does it mean to be successful? And I say the best definition I've ever seen of success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal. That worthy goal may be a physical fitness goal. It may be that I want to get in better shape. Well, there's no money specifically related to that. There can be, because now if you have more energy, now you can go out there and create more money. A lot of times I have people say, I'd really like to make more money, I just don't have the energy. Or that just seems like too much work. Or, my health situation doesn't allow me to do the things that you say I need to do in order to make more money. Protecting your health is one of the best things you can do. I'm all about living a life of balance. And that balance means we don't just focus on financial issues. We focus on our health, the physical issues, as well as the fiscal issues. We also focus on, maybe your emotional health, your mental health. All of these things come into play. You've got to make sure that your life is in balance. And once it gets off kilter, you're going to suffer with your physical as well as your fiscal issues. You've got to keep everything in balance. Your health is one of those key core components that has to be taken care of. If you neglect it, you're sabotaging yourself, not just physically, but also fiscally.
But planning for healthcare disasters or medical emergencies is something that you do need to kind of have incorporated into your overall budget and your strategy for preserving your wealth too.
It's an essential step in making sure you preserve your wealth, because I've seen situations where somebody worked their entire life to make sure they built up a pretty sizable overall net worth, but then they lost it all through healthcare costs. For instance, I mean, it doesn't take long. If you're in the hospital very long, I heard a story the other day, somebody was in the hospital for, it may have just been a week or 2 weeks, I don't remember the particulars on it, and they racked up overall healthcare costs, medical bills, $50,000. Well, if you don't have proper insurance to take care of that, you may find yourself in a situation where you say $50,000 could destroy you. Well, you've also got situations where you find out that, okay, I incurred that, my insurance paid a certain portion of it, but then I was responsible for maybe 20% of those costs.
Right.
Well, 20% of $50,000 is $10,000. You know, there are plenty of people out there that don't have $10,000 that they can say, oh, no problem, here you go, let me just turn that over to you. I can assure you there are way more people than that. Even if they did have the money, they don't want to write a check when they didn't have to.
Continually assessing your personal preservation plan. How do you not get obsessed with continually assessing it?
Well, part of it, once again, is to turn things over to your professionals. You know, the way I look at it is it's just like going to my doctor. I don't want to become so obsessed with my health that every time anything just feels a little different, or maybe I'm sniffling a little bit, better run to the emergency room. I don't want to do that. At the same time, it's the same way with our finances. We don't want to get into a situation that every time anything happens, oh no, I better go talk to my lawyer, better go talk to my accountant, better go talk to my financial advisor. Well, don't want to even look at yourself as that personal advisor that you've got to go through and I better take a look at the financial statement, better look at spreadsheets. Now I've got all these things. Pretty soon you get so bogged down in that you can't go out there and apply yourself to your highest and best use, which is perhaps generating the income. You've got to stay on top of it, but it's not something that should take all of your time. This is something just like a yearly exam. You need to make sure you have a yearly exam for your financial plan. That's all I'm mentioning right here. And sometimes these are things that people don't get overly excited about, but it's something you need to be aware of. And just set aside one day a year to make sure that you know everything's taken care of.
All right, that's good advice, and this has all been good advice. So just, thank you so much for elaborating on some of that. We look forward to our future discussions with you.
Thank you.